Assalamu alaikum. I am Dr. Sani Asif, Assistant Professor in Anatomy. Today we will discuss about joints, their general anatomy. Firstly, the introduction of the joints. What is a joint? Joint is the junction between two or more bones. Where the two bones meet, there will be the formation of joint. With the exception of the hyoid bone, every bone in the body is connected to or forms a joint. There are almost 230 joints in the body. Again, we will discuss its definition. A joint is the location at which two or more bones make contact. They are constructed to allow movement and provide mechanical support and are classified structurally and functionally. So, we discussed about its definition. You should know wherever the two or more bones meet, there will be the formation of joint. Then we discuss about its movement and it also provide the mechanical support. Now we will discuss about its classification. Joints are classified structurally and functionally. Firstly, the structural classification, it is determined by how the bones connect to each other, while functional classification is determined by the degree of movement between the articulating bones. First of all, we will discuss its functions. What are the functions of joint? Why we need joints? Mainly, the function is to hold the skeletal bones together. Number second is the allow the skeleton some flexibility so gross movement can occur. And third is the make bone growth possible. These are the main three functions which are required. Now we will discuss about the classification of the joints. I told you that joints are classified structurally and functionally. Firstly, we will discuss the structural classification of the joints. Structurally, the joints are classified into three types: fibrous, which are also known as the fixed joints. Then is the cartilaginous, which are slightly movable joints. And third one are the synovial, which are freely movable joints. These are the three types of joints if we classify joints structurally. Then we will discuss one by one. Number one is the fibrous joints, which are further classified into sutures, which can be of various types: plain, squamous, serrate, dentate, shindialysis. Then fibrous joints also include the Gom Forces, and third is the Syndosmosis. I am just telling about them in the form of a flow sheet. We will discuss them one by one with examples. So the fibrous joints, which is one of the structural classification of the joint, which is are fixed. I told you that these are of three types: sutures, Gom Forces, and Syndosmosis. Second one structural classification of joint is the cartilaginous joints, which are slightly movable, and they are divided into primary cartilaginous joints and the secondary cartilaginous joints. Primary cartilaginous joints have their own another name, which is synchondrosis, and secondary cartilaginous joints is also known as the symphysis. You should know both names. We can ask in the viva or in the written in any form. Number third is the synovial joints, if we classify structurally, which are freely movable joint. These are very common joint, and these includes plane, hinge, pivot, bicondylar, ellipsoid, saddle, and ball and socket variety. So this is the just flow sheet to show you how you will classify joints structurally. Now we will discuss them one by one. First of all, we will discuss about the fibrous joints, which are also known as the immovable joints. Fibrous, as the name indicates, here the two bones will be connected by a dense connective tissue, mainly collagen. What is collagen? You know about it. This is the most abundant protein in the body. And the fibrous joints are further divided into three types. As we told you, what was the three types of fibrous joints? Sutures, Gom Forces, and yes, recall them. Now, the second one were the cartilaginous joints. Cartilaginous joints, which I told you, these are classified into further two types, primary and secondary cartilaginous joints. Why they are known as cartilaginous joints? Because they are connected by the cartilage. Their articulating surfaces have the cartilage. And what about the freedom of movement? If we discuss about their freedom of movement, then their range of movement is between the fibrous and the synovial joints. Means they can move more than fibrous joints but less as compared to the synovial joint. Number third is the in the structural classification is the synovial joints, which have the space between the articulating bones for the synovial fluid. This classification contains the joints that are the most mobile of the three and includes the knee and the shoulder joint. So, if we talk about the free mobility of these joints, the fibrous joints were the fixed joints or immovable joints. Cartilaginous joints have their mobility in between the synovial and the fibrous joints, and synovial joints are the freely movable joints. Now we will discuss in detail the fibrous joints, which was the one of the structural classification of the joints, and we also called them as immovable or fixed joints. These are further classified into three types. Number one is the sutures, or you can say synostosis. As you know, where are the sutures present? Sutures are present in the skull. As you see in this diagram, here are the sutures. These are found between the bones of the skull, and in fetal skull, the sutures are wide to allow slight movement during birth. They later become rigid. This is the diagram which show different types of sutures. You can see here plain suture. This one is the plain suture, and its example would be median palatine suture. Second one is the serrate suture, and you can see the tooth-like projections, and its example is the interparietal suture. Then is the squamous suture. This here will be the example will be temporal and the parietal bones, the suture between the temporal and parietal bones. Then lambdoid suture will be the example of the denticulate suture, this one. And the syndosmosis, where the wedge and groove structure, this is formed between the ala of the vomer and rostral of the sphenoid bone. This was the first type sutures. Then fibrous joints are also classified into syndosmosis. What is syndosmosis? When the two bones are connected by the interosseous membrane or ligaments, then the joint formed is the fibrous joint, including category syndosmosis. What will be its example? Interosseous in radioulnar joint and the tibiofibular joint. As you can see in this diagram, this is the tibia and fibula, and this is the ligament, interosseous ligament, and it is connecting them. So, tibiofibular joint, and also in the radioulnar joint. So, syndosmosis has two examples, radioulnar and the tibiofibular joints. Then is the Gom Forces. This is the third and the last type of the fibrous joints. Gom Forces is a specialized fibrous joint restricted to fixation of teeth and alveolar sockets of the maxilla or mandible. The root of the tooth is attached to the socket within alveolus by a periodontal ligament. As you can see here, it is fixed in the socket, root is fixed, and this is by the periodontal ligament. So, fibrous joints have three types. Number one is, yes, suture. Second one, yes, recall. This was the, चलें हम लोग देख भी लेते हैं. Syndosmosis, जिसमें हमने क्या बताया था? Yes, radioulnar joints and the tibiofibular joints because they are connected by the interosseous membrane. And the last variety is the Gom Forces. I hope now the fibrous joints are clear. These are very simple. Now we come to the second category of the structural classification, which is the cartilaginous joints. Cartilaginous joints are those joints in which the bone forming joints are united by means of either hyaline cartilage or the fibrocartilage. The cartilaginous joints are also lack the joint cavity. But joint cavity is present in which joint? Synovial joint. As I told you earlier, the cartilaginous joints are further classified into two types, primary and secondary cartilaginous joints. Now come to the differences between the primary and the secondary cartilaginous joints. What are the primary cartilaginous joints? These are the joints which are also known as the synchondroses. The bones forming the joints are connected by a plate of hyaline cartilage. These joints are immovable and mostly temporary in nature. This cartilage may ossify with the age. So, we learned that in the primary cartilaginous joints, they will be the temporary nature. But in case of secondary cartilaginous joints, they are permanent in nature. So, this is the first difference. Then you can see the examples of primary cartilaginous joints. Mainly, the examples in the humans are the joint between the first rib and the manubrium of the sternum. And second example would be joint between the epiphysis and the diaphysis of the growing long bone. As you can see here in this bone, this is the epiphysis, growing end, and this one is the diaphysis. And this one is the epiphyseal plate, you can say the hyaline cartilage. These two are the examples of the primary cartilaginous joints which are temporary in nature. Second type is the secondary cartilaginous joints, which are also known as the symphysis. In these joints, the articular surfaces of the bone forming the joints are covered by a thin plate of hyaline cartilage, which are connected by a disc of fibrocartilage. Its examples are very simple. You know about its example? Okay, I will tell you. The joint between the vertebrae. You can see here the fibrocartilaginous intervertebral disc between two vertebral bodies. This is one of the example of the secondary cartilaginous joints which are permanent joints. Some of the examples, symphysis pubis, then manubriosternal joint and symphysis menti. These are the few examples of the secondary cartilaginous joints. So we discussed till now the joints. What are joints? Then their classification, which are classified structurally and functionally. Structurally, we say that the joints have three types: fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and the synovial joints. Then we discuss about their definitions, their range of mobility, and their examples one by one. Now the third type is the synovial joints. As I told you that they have the synovial means joint cavity and synovial fluid. We will discuss it in detail in the next lecture. I hope you understood what I told you in this lecture, and Allah Hafiz.